Hi, I'm Jackie Tantillo, and this is Should Have Listened to My Mother. Lean to the Left podcast founder, host, and editor Bob Gatty is my guest this week. Bob refers to himself as just a retired former journalist, freelance writer, and communications guy. However, Mr. Gatty started blogging about politics in 2017, and now thousands of blogs later, he has followers all over the world. He cut his journalistic legs while working with the Pittsburgh Courier, an African-American weekly. In time, he worked at a number of Pennsylvania papers, eventually leading him to be named bureau chief at the State Capitol Bureau in Trenton, New Jersey. In time, Bob spent years working in politics in Washington, including becoming chief of staff for Rep. James J. Florio, who later became Democratic governor of New Jersey. He retired in 2016 after running a successful political media consulting business, GNet Strategic Communications, in the D.C. area. With all of that wonderful historical experience that he's had, he's here with us today to talk about his mother. Hi, Bob. Welcome, welcome, welcome.
Hey, Jackie. Thank you. It's a pleasure. It was great having you on my podcast. I really enjoyed that. And thank you so much for inviting me to come back with you.
Yeah, we got a kind of a sneak peek of both of our past lives. It's kind of fun. And I guess that will be out in your Mother's Day on Lean to the Left podcast, that you'll be able to see the video, right?
That's correct. Both audio and video. And it'll be just before Mother's Day that I'm planning to stream it.
We're here today now to flip the direction of the interview. I'm going to interrogate you about your mother.
Oh, God. Oh, I don't know what I'm going to be able to tell you.
Well, how about if we start off with how you would refer to her, or what her first name is?
Well, her first name is Audrey. Of course, I've always called her Mom. Actually, her name was Audrey Jean. She wasn't quite sure if it was Jean or Jane. Huh. So I never really knew if it was Audrey Jean or Audrey Jane. My grandparents were both German, and I think my grandmother may have had a little bit of, Norwegian or something from that area, but basically they were German.
This was your maternal grandparents?
My maternal grandparents, yeah. And actually her dad, my grandfather, was my hero growing up. I tried to pattern myself after him. He was a very low-key guy. He was a blue-collar worker. He was a tool and die maker at a steel company in Pennsylvania, Butler, Pennsylvania. And he was the dearest man. He taught me how to play horseshoes. He taught me how to fish. He taught me how to hunt. I never liked hunting, but I went with him. I learned a lot from my mom's dad.
And how similar were your mother and her father? Your
Well,
grandfather?
they were similar in a lot of ways. I mean, he was a very kind guy, as I said, kind of low key. My mom was as well. Although
now that you think about it,
in time, when we kids were born, and she was, my father was a minister, a Protestant minister, who later became an army chaplain. And so we had a lot of different home scenarios, I guess I could say. After he graduated from college, which followed World War II, where he served in the Army as a flight mechanic on bombers during World War II over Japan, he came home and decided that not only would he convert from Catholicism to being a Protestant, but that he would become a Protestant minister.
Right. So this is your father we're talking about.
This is my dad. Yeah. So he had to go to college to get his degree and then to seminary. And during that period had churches that he was responsible for in little communities. Two of them were in New York State. 2 of them were in Illinois, and then we moved back to New York again. all the time he had these churches. And that meant that my mom had a lot of responsibility outside of the home. I mean, she had to take care of us kids. By the time it was all said and done, I'm the oldest, but I have a brother and two sisters, younger sisters, and both of whom were very, very close to my mother. So she had responsibility for the family, but she also had responsibility as a preacher's wife, which meant that she had to help make sure that all the social activities of the church went off without a hitch. She played the piano for the services. She supported my dad in whatever he was working on for the church. When we moved to Illinois, we moved to his church that he got was out in the northwestern part of Illinois. But we lived in the middle of cornfields with a bunch of pig farmers. Those were the people that attended the church that he had. So my mom was responsible for making certain that all of the social activities of those, and there were two churches on what they call the charge.
So you had church all 24/7 almost.
I had it 24/7, and it was, let's just say that I don't do that anymore.
I want to go back a little bit because your parents started to date before your dad went to the war or when he was done with fighting?
Before, because I was born during World War II. I was born in 1943. They were high school sweethearts.
Okay, so did your mom see this coming? Did she still really want to marry him once she realized he wanted to be a minister? I mean, that's a lot for anyone to...
I can't tell you that. I was very young, but I can just tell you what the upshot was, and that was that she embraced what he did. She was a very, very strong religious person. I think she had a lot to do with his conversion from Catholicism to becoming a Protestant minister.
So she was Protestant, your mom?
She was, and she was, her parents were very conservative, I would say evangelical type Protestants. And so my mom was too.
So she was on board with all of that.
She was on board with all of that.
That's great.
Yeah,
that's good.
Yeah.
And when you say she was strong, did she, and your dad was traveling, I'm sorry, you have a brother and two sisters or a brother and one sister?
No, brother and two sisters, right.
So she was maintaining the house, the meals. Did she ever have another job outside of all this church work that she did?
No, she didn't. There was enough she had enough to do taking care of our family and managing the house, and then doing the work that she needed to do to help my dad with the churches. And we moved from Illinois to Jamestown, New York, for his last posting, I guess you could say, as a civilian minister. By that time, I was probably 12, 13 years old, and he had two churches there. And he decided during that period to rejoin the Army as a chaplain. He did that. He went in as a lieutenant and was posted at Fort Dix, New Jersey. So there I was going back to New Jersey again. That was my first experience with New Jersey because I was a kid and I went to a high school, what's called on the economy. It was a civilian high school. And then we were sent to France. And so my mom, had to handle all of the arrangements that were involved in making that move. And then when we got there, she had to function as a Army officer's wife, which was a totally different experience for her as before, because the Army has a culture that's, decidedly its own, and she had to deal with that.
How old was she at this point?
At that point, when we went to France, she would have been, that was in the late 50s. So she would have been 30 something, I guess.
And did she embrace it? Was she looking forward to going overseas? Was this her first trip abroad?
It was, but she was afraid. My mom was, despite everything that I've told you, my mom was a shy, timid woman. She did not have a lot of self-confidence. My father had a very strong personality, and I hate to say it, but was domineering and scared her. And the moving to France was hard for her. But she did fine. She certainly kept my brother Dave and I out of too much trouble.
How old were you?
Well, I graduated from high school in France during this posting.
And how many years were you there?
We were there for about 3 years.
Wow, that's a great experience. Or in my mind, it's a great experience.
It was. I was there for my junior and senior year in high school, and then a little bit after I graduated, and then I went back. Well, my dad was transferred back to the States, back to Pennsylvania.
Did you ever have personal conversations when maybe you were older with your mom about how your dad treated her?
Oh, yes, many times. They ended up divorcing and both remarried. My mom ended up marrying another domineering man. He was totally different. He was kind of like my mom's dad. He worked at a steel mill. He was a safety official at the steel mill in Pittsburgh.
She was repeating what
Yeah,
generationally, what your mom.
Exactly. She was repeating. She went from one domineering guy to another. This guy was so domineering that they had a working fireplace, a wood-burning fireplace in this house that was probably 20 or 30 years old that had never been lit because he didn't want it to be dirty. And immediately after his death, the first thing my mom did was build a fire.
I was going to say, light the house on fire.
Well, she built a fire in the fireplace.
Oh,
and
good for her. Good for her. Audrey.
Got it good and
got him.
It was like, she would never say the F word, but...
You mentioned your grandfather was wonderful with you, but it must have been the way he treated his wife as well, your grandmother.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So did your mother ever have an opportunity to be free and to be happy before she got married? Did she go to school? What did she do after high school? Do you know?
She did not go to college. Shortly after she graduated from high school, that she got married, and then my dad went in the service and was sent to Okinawa. But during his time in the Army, coming back on leave, there was time for me to be conceived and then for my brother to be conceived. He was born in 1945. And then later, during the period after he became a minister, my two sisters were born.
Did she want a family, or was that something she did for your dad?
No, she wanted a family. She was a great mom. She loved raising kids. She loved doing all of the things that moms do. She was an excellent cook. My father was Italian and she was not, but she quickly learned how to make Italian food. She made great spaghetti sauce.
Yum.
But she also had the same cooking characteristics of her mom. Now, her mom being German and Eastern European, I guess you could say, meat and potatoes were the standard fare for many of her meals.
As for millions, that hearty meal.
Yeah, as opposed to pasta and spaghetti and all of that
Right.
that my dad...
She must have been pretty convincing to have your dad, an Italian Catholic, convert to become a Protestant minister. She must have had a lot of magic.
She did, but I don't know that he did that for her or because of her. I think she must have influenced it, that decision. He ended up retiring from the Army as a full colonel, but he was in Vietnam for 2 years, I think. And that was extremely hard on my mom. They had a strained relationship by that time anyway. So it was a difficult period.
I bet. That's a lot for anyone with 4 children to be left behind. I know you do have some fun stories to tell.
Yeah, my brother and I were not exactly model kids when it came to being preacher's kids. Preacher's kids are supposed to be
Perfect.
perfect. Yeah. But my mom made us wear these white suits to church, especially when there was an evangelist that came. And my dad would have these preachers, these crazy nutcase. Oh, I should say that because we probably these real conservative hellfire and damnation type preachers. He would have them come like annually as a special treat for the congregation, and they'd come and preach every night during the week for a solid week. And my brother and I would have to go to every single one of these services and sit in the front row. And we would have to we would have to set an example when they called for people to be saved to come forward. And I don't know if you're Protestant and you know what this is all about.
No, I know exactly what you're talking about.
Okay, well, when they would call people to come forward, my brother and I always used to have to go up and pretend we were being saved for the first time. And so we were not happy campers. We had to go to these things. One time we just got so ticked off that we snuck we had a whistle, like the football coaches use to. And when we thought that the preacher had said all he needed to say, we blew our whistle. Both of us. Well,
in the front row in your white suits as well?
Correct. And needless to say, that didn't go over well with my dad, who was thoroughly embarrassed. And when we got home, took his anger out on us using his army belt.
Oh, that's terrible. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
But before we go, I want to, how did your mom respond in that situation? Because she was sitting with you. Oh, no, she was playing the piano.
She was playing the piano.
So you were on your own in that front row.
We were. Yeah, she was sitting at the piano. She was embarrassed. She was upset with us. Bobby, David, why did you do that? That's embarrassing. Don't you know what that does for your father? How embarrassing that is, and on and on. And, we felt badly. We knew we shouldn't have done it, but it was my dad who, let us really know what he thought.
Whose idea was it to bring the whistle?
Probably mine. I was the oldest one. And then that one final story from Illinois about the two of us and our BB guns. We decided that, there was, what a silo is?
Yes.
Okay. So there was this silo that had been blown away by this tornado. And so there was nothing but this big hole in the ground, the silo pit, where the silo used to be. Well, we were over by that silo pit one day, my brother and I, we had our BB guns because we'd been out shooting birds, and there was a skunk. There was a skunk inside this silo pit, and David said, we need to get that skunk out of there. How can we get that skunk out of there? I said, I don't know. Why don't we make a ramp and see if we can get him to come up the ramp. So we got this big board and we put it down at an angle, and we started yelling at the skunk, come on. Well, the skunk didn't move. So we got our BB guns and started shooting the skunk in the butt, trying to get it to, go up the board. Well, all we accomplished was getting sprayed by the skunk. So my poor mother, had to deal with all those clothes that were just totally ruined from the skunk spray. So she decided, even though we were poor as church mice, that there was no getting that skunk smell out of those clothes. So she took them in the backyard, put them in the burn barrel. Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah, yeah.
She probably wished she could put you two in there as well.
Yeah, she probably did.
Did you ever laugh with her about this stuff when you were older?
Oh
Or-
yeah, older when she was much older,
Hmm.
and after when she was in her later years, when she was just before she went into the nursing home, she had to go to a assisted living facility finally. Her husband John had died. She was alone. She was having COPD issues, couldn't really function on her own. So we had to put her in an assisted living place. And it was during that period while she was there, and I was visiting her weekly and sometimes more frequently even than that. I would drive from Maryland to Pennsylvania to be with her, and so we talked and reminisced about all these kinds of things. And she laughed. She thought by that time she thought it was pretty funny.
Yeah, it's easier to laugh later on sometimes
Yeah,
than in
really.
the moment. So tell me, what's a gift or gifts that your mom gave you?
Well, my mom was a pretty creative person, and I think that I picked up some of that from her. It's why I became a writer. She was a very kind person. In my daily life, I try to emulate her. She got that from my grandfather, her dad. She was a wonderful cook. She taught me how to make a lot of dishes, and I love to cook today. I do most of the cooking here now. I really don't know. I mean, she left with me a determination that nothing would stop me from doing what I wanted to accomplish, even if maybe I didn't have the tools to do so. For example, I never finished college. I never got a degree from college, but yet I decided that I was going to become a journalist. And I did so and was pretty successful in my professional career, despite the fact that I did not have a degree. And she didn't either. And she taught me that she burned it into my soul that if I wanted to accomplish anything in life, I couldn't quit. I had to go after it. And despite the odds, find a way to succeed. And that's what I always tried to do.
Well, that's a pretty wonderful list to have, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Thank you, Audrey. So, in our last remaining minutes, we would like to mention again your podcast, your blog site. It's Lean to the Left.
Yeah, I moved to South Carolina in 2016, and I decided at that time that I needed to continue to write even though I was retired. And at that time, Donald Trump was president or had just become president, and he upset me no end with the way he talked about the news media. So I decided to call my blog site Not Fake News, and I worked on it for a number of years, and between myself and several contributors, between us, we've published I don't know 1,500 blogs. And then 3 years ago, I decided that the blog site needed to be turned into a podcast, and which later became the Lean to the Left podcast. I expanded that to interviewing guests. I like to focus on guests that can talk about social issues that I care about: equality, the environment, women's rights, racism, and education. So I've been lucky to find wonderful guests. I'm closing in on 500 episodes now on the Lean to the Left podcast, and I've just expanded my YouTube subscription base to just over 5,000 today. That's growing. I'm working really hard on that. Jackie, I was so thrilled to have you on to talk about what you're up to. I would encourage anyone who's listening to this show to take a listen to that. Just go to podcast.leantotheleft.net. You can find that podcast with Jackie.
Thank you, Bob Gatty. Last name is spelled Gatty. double T as in Tom, Y, Bob Gatty. Thank you so much for joining me on Should Have Listened to My Mother.
Well, you know what? That's a great title. And when I saw it, I said to myself, I gotta have her on. I mean, what the hell is this about? And then I got to thinking, Mother's Day's coming up, so that'd be a great show to play around Mother's Day. So I was happy that we were able to do the interview, schedule it, get it done, and it'll be streaming then.
It was really great to speak with you asking me questions. And I want to thank you for sharing your stories of your mom, for Audrey, because I know we're really only scratching the surface, and I get a sense that it was really challenging for her and your father and him being away, and yet the peer pressure to be this perfect mom and perfect family as the minister's wife. I admire her tenacity and her passion and her love for you and your siblings, because as you mentioned, she really, really wanted to be a mom. So thank you for sharing your story. And we will be back next week with another episode of Should Have Listened to My Mother.